Welcome to Practically Fit, Real Fitness Over 40. I'm Alex.
And I'm Abbie.
And today we're talking about the latest craze in nutrition, protein.
Yeah, it definitely does feel you cannot get away from protein these days. It's popping up on labels everywhere. It feels like it's obligatory for a fitness influencer to mention it in any nutrition video they do. And if, like me, you're a woman over 40 and you have not yet been told some version of the mathematical calculation of how much protein you should be taking per pound or gram you weigh, then I feel like you would be telling me that you live off the grid. So in this episode, we're going to do a deeper dive into all things protein to help you navigate through the mass of noise and marketing campaigns. But first, let's limber up.
So Abbie, it's a drink theme edition of the warm-up today, and we're going to get into some of the latest news about coffee, tea, and alcohol. And this follows up on some of the discussions we've had in recent weeks, doesn't it?
And I think it also follows up on your obsession with these things. Like, clearly, your news app is feeding you the same stories again and again because we just seem to keep coming back to coffee.
No, I'm just interested in the benefits that these beverages can provide in your life, or the pitfalls as it comes to alcohol. And I think on this one, we'll have a bit of a competition between ourselves because we've got coffee versus tea. So let's start with coffee. First article comes from Study Finds, which is one of my favorite websites. I love reading a study, as you can tell from the podcast. And the title of this study, or the title of this article, is Men Who Drink More Coffee Show Higher Testosterone Levels, Study Finds. So I like that on the Study Finds news website, they include Study Finds in the headline.
Yeah, very apt.
This is big news, though. I mean, I saw this and, I was excited when I saw that it was heart healthy to drink up to 400 milligrams of caffeine a day through coffee. But when I saw that coffee may be giving me higher testosterone levels, like that, the great news on coffee keeps popping up. So excited about that. This article says, quote, men who drank more coffee daily had significantly higher testosterone, with each daily cup linked to a 0.29 NMOLL rise. I guess that's a measure of testosterone, and that's good, even after accounting for weight, smoking, activity, and alcohol. So this is what this study found. It also says heavier coffee drinkers as a group also had less body fat and more muscle, though the heavy drinking group skewed more male, which may partly explain that pattern. So they've studied this here, and it does note that the study only captured a single point in time, so it cannot say whether coffee is raising testosterone, whether higher testosterone leads to more coffee drinking, or whether something else explains both. But I see no downside to upping your coffee intake within that safe level of caffeine intake, particularly if you're a man, because the study looked at women and didn't really see kind of the similar benefits.
Okay. That study sounds like it told you nothing.
It tells me, it reinforces the notion in my head that coffee is good for me. Don't you want me to have more testosterone? That's a good thing, right?
I think it's just I think it's that piece of like looking for evidence that supports your theory.
Supports your worldview, right? Hey, the good thing about drinking this much coffee as well is that it keeps you regular. So that's an added benefit for those men out there who want to up their coffee intake.
Whatever floats your boat. Well, I will share the other news story that we focused on for this warm-up, which is from the Washington Post. And that was talking about 5 science-backed health benefits of tea, from longevity to brain health. So scientists have found that the compounds in tea can protect your blood vessels, lower inflammation, aid relaxation, and potentially boost your gut microbiome. In one analysis published in the journal Life Sciences, researchers described tea as nature's gift for promoting human health. This article is summarizing tea's benefits based on studies over the years, but found but I found the bit about longevity really interesting. So based on a longevity study from the UK, of course.
Right. This had to be the UK because they're talking about tea drinking.
There's tea's drunk widely in the world, I think you'll find.
Yeah, but I think you lot drink, as we've talked about, drink more tea than the average bear.
Oh, I don't know. I think you'd need to go off and do some investigation to see what country drinks the most tea. Anyway, based on this longevity study, scientists tracked about 500,000 adults, so pretty big sample group, between the ages of 40 and 69 for over 10 years. They looked at diet, beverage consumption, lifestyle habits, medical conditions, overall health. 90% of the tea drinkers drank black tea and 7% drank green tea.
So they're like you, because you drink black tea.
I do. I occasionally drink a herbal tea, but I like black tea the most. And the researchers found that the tea drinkers were less likely to die during the study period compared with the non-tea drinkers. People who drank 2 to 3 cups daily seemed to benefit the most. So that seemed to be the sweet spot from the study. And those individuals had a 13% reduction in mortality compared with the people who rarely or never drank tea. The findings were essentially the same regardless of whether people also drank coffee or not. So sounds like tea is outweighing coffee.
Well, I wouldn't say that with all the great research we've been seeing on coffee, but this doesn't actually, what this says to me is like I need to drink both tea and coffee on a daily basis just to maximize my health gains.
Well, I think you would have to then look because you still need to stay within your caffeine boundary, so you would have to be swapping one out for the other at some point.
Because it says the findings were essentially the same regardless.
Yes, but you still can only take so much caffeine a day.
Well, right, yeah, but like tea doesn't have as much caffeine, so like if I drink what I've been doing typically is like 2 cups of coffee in the morning, although my first cup might count for like a little more than 2.
It's a pint glass.
Quote unquote, yes, but the tea in the afternoon, I typically have like a green tea in the afternoon. So maybe I need to have a green tea in the afternoon and then another tea at night to just like wind down the day.
Yeah. I mean, a cup of tea before bed, one of the greatest things in the world.
Well, how many teas do you think you drink per day? Are you in this 2 to 3 cups daily?
I way outperform that.
How many do you drink? I've never counted.
On an average day, probably 4.
Okay. So, yeah,
4 or 5.
This is good for your life here. See, you can be excited about this like I was excited about these coffee.
Well, I'm also excited because that is a pretty well-researched study. Like, 500,000 people over 10 years. It's a good science-based study.
That's right. Well, let's talk about our final article today. It comes from USA Today, and the title is Americans Who Say They Drink Alcohol Remains at a Record Low, Survey Finds. So I thought this was cool because we have talked about a few of these surveys recently on alcohol drinkers, and this is just a new data point that just came out, and it reinforces what we've been discussing previously about alcohol use in the U.S. The article says, quote, Americans are reaching for alcohol at record lows, according to a new Gallup survey. The survey, out on August 20th, found that the number of Americans who say they drink alcohol sits at 54% for the second consecutive year. And, quote, 51% of U.S. adults now believe drinking 1 or 2 alcoholic beverages a day is bad for one's health. That figure is essentially unchanged from last year's record high of 53%. So pretty amazing. These numbers seem to be dropping, like if you look at a running average in terms of the percentage of Americans drinking alcohol.
Well, and also the percentage of people recognizing that it's not good for your health. Like, repeated consumption is not good for your health. That's
right. Yeah. And it's in 2001, so comparing back, only 27% considered moderate drinking bad for one's health. So that number has almost doubled over this 25-year period here. Pretty amazing. Also, they surveyed for the first time on consuming non-alcoholic beer, wine, or spirits instead of an alcoholic drink in the past year, and 17% reported having done that. So that's why we see all these restaurants adding all these like non-alcoholic cocktails everywhere you turn, just continuing the trend towards less alcohol being drank in the US. And we've kind of been on that boat lately too, haven't we?
Yeah, no, definitely. Interesting to see what the studies say in the future years.
All right. That's it for today's warm-up. All right, so today our main topic is protein. This is really, again, as we talked about at the top, it's really kind of a protein craze going right now. And everywhere you look, protein is being added to food. So we wanted to talk about this. And it's been a while since I took biology. So I thought it would be important for us to brush up on what proteins are and why they are so important here at the top of this segment.
Yeah, good idea, Alex. It's been a while since I actually am so old. For those in the UK, I did double science GCSEs, which was 2 GCSEs across the 4 sciences. Well, 3 sciences and environmental science. So that's how old I am. But yeah, it's a while since I have looked at a biology textbook.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Like, that means you had like numerous different, do they do less science testing now on those tests? Because GCSEs are like your final test, right? Essentially.
Oh, no, you do your GCSEs for 5 years. You just do that test at the end of the 5 years.
Okay. So yeah.
It's basically your high school education.
Yeah. I was, at one point in my life, I thought I could be a biology major, and that was in college, and that lasted for about a semester after I got like a 53 on my first test. It was much harder in college than it was in high school. So yeah, that's kind of funny to think about. I think as adults, though, back to protein, we often associate protein simply with building muscle. But going and looking at the chemistry and biology behind this, proteins are really vital for a large number of important things in your body.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's really interesting to look a little further into what proteins are and what they do. Because like you said, Alex, it's got so connected to muscle. I had kind of forgotten what they're connected to. So Cleveland Clinic, one of our favorite health information sources, have a great article breaking down the role that protein plays in your body. And proteins are molecules made up of hundreds of amino acids wrapped into a chain. That's why you hear reference to chains or links when people talk about them. Things like the term polypeptide chain in relation to supplements like BCAAs or branched chain amino acids. But already, I think we're stepping into like why this sometimes gets so complicated, right? Like there's a lot of science behind this.
Yeah, it's complicated. And going back and looking at this reminded me that it's not just about muscle building. A lot of these things that we're seeing marketed as supplements are different types of protein. So Abbie, tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So here are some of the different types of proteins that are in your body and that your body needs to function. So defense proteins or antibodies, enzymes, which you will have heard of if you have been talking or thinking about digestion and breaking down fats and carbs and getting that energy into your body.
Yeah, and I've certainly, those of us who have digestive problems have heard a lot about enzymes and probiotics and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then messenger proteins that help cells communicate across your body, motor proteins that help your muscles move, food move through your digestive tract and help with wound healing, for example. And then structural proteins like collagen, which is also very trendy right now, that helps support your cells. And that's just a list of some of the proteins that are in your body. We didn't list all of them.
Yeah, so basically your body, everything it does is relying on proteins was my main takeaway from this. So quick kind of chemistry and biology refresher there. We don't want to go too deep into it, but it's really amazing how important proteins are for your body. And based on all that, you see why it's not just muscles, it's the entire functioning of you, the human, as the organism. So it's really important that we're incorporating protein in our diet. And I think people, for the most part, are pretty familiar with traditional sources of protein. It's things like meat, seafood, eggs, dairy, beans, nuts, things that you have typically considered to be sources of protein? I mean, there's protein in a lot of foods, right? But when you're thinking about high protein foods, those would be the ones that you probably would think about. And then, of course, there have been protein supplements and bars that have been popular for years. So, Abbie, let's talk about that. How do you personally incorporate protein into your diet?
Well, I think this is really interesting because actually, for a long time, I don't think I thought about protein at all. And especially as I thought about, dieting or watching what I was eating, I would often lean away from protein sources, and think about things like salads or being very light in terms of things that I eat. Nowadays, I have read up more and understand that actually protein is a really important source to have in your meals to keep you fuller, especially as you get older and the calories that you need is lower. So actually, how do you have things that satiate you more so that you're able to, stay within your recommended calories? So, I mean, I really do pretty much lean to those traditional sources of protein. So meat, eggs, dairy, nuts, those are the kind of things that I tend to lean towards for protein.
Yeah, and you don't really do protein supplements. I know you've dabbled a bit, and I do it pretty much on a daily basis, and the kids do it some, but you've just kind of stuck to the whole food approach. Do you not like the protein powders? Is there a reason behind that, or?
I just don't feel like it gets me as full. I would prefer to have a chicken breast or on a salad or a chicken breast in a sandwich or a wrap or something like that than a protein shake.
Yeah, and I don't I'm not drinking multiple protein shakes or anything like that. I do it typically once a day because most days I'll have a smoothie. So for me, it just makes sense to put some of that protein powder in there. Lately, I've been using kind of a mix of that cassava protein that's so popular. It's a plant-based protein and it has some other good stuff in it. And then also this stuff called PB powder, which is just basically the protein from peanut butter, but without all the, fat.
Yeah,
because I love peanut butter.
I have used that PB powder too. I think that works really well in shakes, and it's a good add in to. I put that into my oatmeal or something like that. To just up the protein. The other one that I eat pretty regularly every day pretty much is Greek yogurt. That's good in terms of a fairly high protein source, fairly low calorie. So I'll often have that for breakfast with berries and oatmeal.
Yeah.
Berries and granola, or I'll have oatmeal and I'll try and put some additional protein through that. Peanut butter is the one that me and Alex argue over because he cites it as a good source of protein, and I'm for the amount of protein for it to be high, the calories are ridiculous. So you're talking about 300-400 calories for you to get to the same kind of protein level as would be in a protein powder.
Yeah, but it makes your shake taste or your smoothie taste amazing. Although, yeah, lately I rarely use that in my smoothies these days. I've been using the powders. And for me, an important thing has been trying to find plant-based protein that I like, because the traditional protein when I was younger that was so popular in the strength training community was whey protein, which is milk-based protein. And, I'm pretty, and that should have been my first sign growing up that I'm a little bit intolerant to milk, because anytime I would have that, it was not good. It resulted in a very quick trip to the bathroom. So, yeah.
TMI.
Sorry, it's just there's a lot of us who have these problems. Let's talk about it, right? So that's why I like the plant-based protein, because it's typically, for me, been easier to digest. There's also soy protein, which can be good, but I've read, for men, there may be some concerns about consuming too much soy protein.
Yeah, I have a shake mix that the kids like too that is soy based, and that's pretty good and not too high in terms of calories. And I often would take that as either a meal replacement for breakfast or pre-workout, and so does our eldest.
Yeah, so we're cognizant of the protein intake. We do pretty straightforward things. We try to incorporate it into, whole foods, having servings of meat a couple times a day. Like I said, I do like the powders, but now protein is being put into everything, which again is really the genesis of why we're talking about this in this episode. And we'll talk some more at the end of the episode about some of the unusual protein-infused items that are out there now. That's our fun closer for the show today. But what's interesting to me is why there has been this surge in culture around protein and why foods are being marketed as being protein-infused or having more protein in them. Abbie, why do you think that is?
Well, there's a few theories out there when you go and look it up, as we did before this episode. But there's been definite influences or trends over the years that have driven increased focus or increased awareness of protein and its importance, which I think has ultimately led to where we are today. So in the past, like years and years ago, protein may have been more strongly associated with things like bodybuilders, boxers, or professional athletes, or really active professions like farm workers. So for most of the 1900s, eating more protein than is recommended was mainly limited to working men and athletes, right? And then nutritional science and research really took off during and after World War II, partly fueled by the need for healthy soldiers and by a physically weakened population following the Great Depression. So in 1943, that was the first time in the US that the Food and Nutrition Board released comprehensive recommended daily allowances that included protein along with calories and vitamins for adults and children. And then I thought this was really interesting, Alex. The first precursor to the modern protein shake hit the market in 1952. I wouldn't have thought it would have been that far back.
Yeah.
But that was bodybuilder Bob Hoffman's.
Oh, yes, Bob Hoffman. I know him.
High protein powder, which was made from a soy protein, whey, and flavoring. So that's interesting, had both soy and whey in it. And in that same decade, so in the 1950s, the United Nations publicly identified protein deficiency as a major nutritional problem in developing countries. So that's when we started to really start talking about protein more. I think the next big turning point for protein came in the early 2000s when scientific studies showed that high protein diets could help people lose weight. So that's when you suddenly saw some of those high protein diets like Atkins, for example, if you remember that, and marketing for protein products took off.
Yeah, and that's when I really remember it coming about, like when I was in college and we started taking protein supplements and trying different protein supplements, some of which were like terrible and had other weird things in them that were marketed towards like men for strength training. Yeah, that timeline aligns perfectly when I remember it taking off here. Was it like that in the UK as well?
Well, yeah. And I mean, obviously I'm coming from a different gender perspective. So I think I remember it in terms of like, this can be a way for you to get slimmer. So like the Atkins diet, like these high protein diets, like really focused on trying to get a slimmer waistline. So that was a second like big turning point. And then in the last decade, I think we have seen a concentrated push for higher protein, particularly with women. I think this is importantly coincided with the recommendations and focus for women to incorporate more strength training into their routines, especially as they age. And protein is critical there because of the role it plays in building muscle. And then much more recently, with GLP-1 drugs becoming more prominent, protein has again had a link and an importance there, highlighting the importance for people who are taking those medications to track and up their protein intake to prevent loss of muscle instead of fat.
Yeah, because that's a big concern when you're on those, is that you could lose muscle. It's reducing your desire to eat, right? And that can impact your entire body. It's not just fat loss. So that's why there's such a big focus on people who are taking GLP-1s, tracking their protein and trying to get protein throughout the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in this era of fitness influencers, GLP-1 weight loss drugs, I think experts are saying that more and more Americans are actually meeting that or even exceeding their daily protein needs, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But I also think it's interesting that with these GLP-1s being so prominent, that now you're seeing the marketplace react to that, right? I've read an article about this in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was last week, that food companies are trying to adjust to this new normal because there's a pretty significant portion of the population that's taking these. I didn't look up what that number was, but it's enough to where the food companies, especially companies that make, processed foods, snacks, things that are unhealthier, they're like thinking we've got to shift our strategy to keep selling food. And I think that's what's driving a lot of this.
Wow. Interesting you say that, Alex, because I had a little look in terms of what the market looks like. And by 2024, the protein supplements market was valued at $9.88 billion in the United States and $28.15 billion globally, according to Fortune Business Insights. That's a huge market.
Yeah, that's a massive marketplace. And I suspect it's one of those things, if you look out at like the 5 to 10 year forecasts, it could be something that is growing as well.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see how that changes over time. So, Alex, we've established that protein is vital for your body, and there's lots of different ways to get your protein intake through natural foods or through supplements. So how much protein should you incorporate into your diet on a daily basis?
Yeah, this is where it gets a little bit confusing. There's so many different estimates out there on how much protein you need. And I always heard that if you want to be really aggressive with your protein intake, especially like in the bodybuilder type community, those folks, they're shooting for like at least a gram per every pound of body weight. To me, that sounds challenging. So for me, like how would I eat 167 grams of protein in one day? That's a lot of protein.
Yeah, well, I've actually looked at various different news sources on this too, and the average male consumes about 100 grams of protein a day. So, a fairly reasonable amount. And like you said, there's varying recommendations for protein intake, but Harvard Health recommends 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight or 0.36 grams of protein per pound. But I've had a lot of, especially for women, if you are wanting to increase your protein, that's probably a little bit on the low side. So trying to get up to around 100 grams of protein a day.
Yeah, that felt low to me. I actually went and looked at their calculator, and you put in like your height, your weight, your gender. And that said, I only needed 61 grams a day. So I looked at another common recommendation that's out there, and that one was 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So again, we get into this like kilogram versus pounds. It's confusing. I know for you, kilograms is probably less confusing, but I converted that to pounds. And so for me, if you're following this other recommendation that's pretty common out there, that's about 90 grams of protein, which seems pretty reasonable and kind of compares to what you were just saying about 100 grams a day for women.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one way that I think is a little easier to think about it is to think about it per meal. So like roughly looking for like 35 grams of protein, 35 to 40 grams of protein for each of your meals. So I think that's, slightly easier in my head anyway to think about it that way.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I think with that is if you are trying to go more towards that metric I mentioned at the beginning, which would be like 1 gram per every pound of body weight, which is on the really high end. See, at that point, I think if you're not supplementing protein, you would have to, or you're one of these folks who's just eating like multiple, chicken breasts or hamburger patties or whatever a day.
But I do think there are some hacks, right? Like maybe this one isn't a good example, but like I said earlier, if I take Greek yogurt and then I put a powder through it, like that's not increasing the volume of food, right? But it is increasing the volume of protein. So I think there's some kind of really interesting ways that you can do it. But I agree, like if you're trying to get up to like 170 grams of protein, you're going to have to be taking some supplement.
Yeah, I remember when we were in college, we were trying to increase protein intake. And so we'd go to the cafeteria and just get like I kid you not, like 4 or 5 hamburger patties or 4 or 5 chicken breasts. And that is a lot of food.
Or drinking eggs.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I remember from when I was a teenager, of the boys saying that, like, the rugby players drinking eggs.
They're not worried about salmonella, I guess.
Right. So a big takeaway for us in looking at all of this is, if you're doing a lot of things like strength training, that may be when you want to up the amount of protein that you're consuming.
Yeah, we found an interesting quote from Dr. Dariush Mozaffran. He's a Tufts University nutrition expert. And he said this: if you're actively building muscle with strength or resistance training, more protein can help. Otherwise, you're getting enough. So my big takeaway from this is like 90 to 100 grams of protein a day, depending on, your exact body weight. Probably pretty good. Trying to get up to those like higher limits where you're consuming 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight probably isn't necessary unless you're like an elite bodybuilder or something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But like we say, like, just making sure that you're being focused on protein. And if you're not seeing some of the things that you want to see, then maybe it's a good area to look at and explore.
Yeah, and try to maybe do an experiment and just kind of look at what you're eating on a daily basis and just do a rough estimate of how much protein you're getting. It doesn't have to be exact, but if you're coming in with numbers below some of those recommended ranges, you may want to look at supplementing a bit more.
Yeah, and for sure, one of the things that I found, because Alex definitely like highlighted this to me when we both worked from home, like especially after the pandemic, I'd make a salad and he's like, "Where's our protein?"
Yeah.
He would always ask that, because I always just made a salad with, salad items on it and maybe like cheese. And now always making sure that I add chicken. You feel so much fuller from that salad when you have a strong protein source on it, for sure.
Yeah, a salad without like a protein source for me lasts about an hour and I'm hungry again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so let's round out our protein talk by talking about some of the weirdest protein items that are out there, because with this protein craze, there are lots of new protein items at the grocery store. My favorite one has to be protein in your coffee. So thank you, Starbucks, for this amazing innovation.
Yeah, well, Alex, they're after that, some of that $1 billion market that we talked about earlier, right? But yeah, so Starbucks now has a whole line of protein boosted drinks, like protein lattes. You can even get protein infused in elements of your drink. So a protein infused cold foam.
Well, that's good. Like if you have a drink that's, maybe lower calorie, if you don't, because a lot of their drinks are so heavy on the calories, I could see putting that cold foam on. I mean, I think I saw it was like maybe like 15 grams of protein in the cold foam.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
And they've started to sell these in the grocery store. I mean, Starbucks is a business model, if you want to go look at it. A quote from the Starbucks CEO: "What I've noticed, and as I've understood the behaviors associated with people that ultimately are on GLP-1s, is you end up with more snacking or smaller meals and more protein forward, more fiber forward."
Yeah, so again, this just goes straight back to why this is happening. I believe this current, like 2026 iteration of the protein craze we're seeing is directly tied to GLP-1s. And the fiber thing is interesting too, because we're not talking about it, but they're introducing snacks in their stores that have more fiber in them as well. So actually, before the podcast today, Abbie and I thought, well, let's experiment. Let's try some of these protein drinks. And we've got a video of this out on our Instagram, which is @PracticallyFitPod. We tried the vanilla latte, the iced vanilla latte protein drink. I don't know the exact name of it.
It was the iced vanilla protein latte.
There we go. So Abbie, what did you think of that?
Well, I don't drink a lot of coffee. I don't drink a lot of Starbucks. But I thought it tasted, when I've had them before or like had a sip of the kids' ones, it tasted pretty similar to me.
Yeah, like if you're used to drinking normal Starbucks drinks, I think it will taste the same. What I noticed about the drink, because we did the taste test on it, and by the way, I didn't even think to change mine to almond milk, so I couldn't drink the whole thing, and it's also whey protein, so for me, this really isn't an option. I'll be curious to see over time if they bring in like a plant-based protein option for folks who are either lactose intolerant or who are vegan. But when you look at the actual nutrition on this thing, we got the tall, which is the smallest size, always confusing. Tall is a small size. 210 calories, 22 grams of sugar, and 22 grams of protein and 75 milligrams of caffeine. So it's got one shot of espresso in it. So it's a great caffeine boost, if you're wanting to drink this in your afternoon. But if you drank multiple of these in a day to get, you'd get close to 50 grams of protein, but you'd also get 420 calories just on a tall size. I think I looked at the grande, which is the medium, and it was over 250 maybe.
I don't think that's that far off their lattes normally, though. You're forgetting because you would order something with almond milk, which is like 30 calories for the milk. The milk is around 150 calories if you're putting what you would need for a latte. So 250 calories for a latte is pretty typical.
Yeah, and the other thing is they have a sugar-free version, and on the tall we looked at that. We didn't try it. I don't know what the ingredients are in that, but it was 150 calories. So that's, if you drank these pretty frequently, that would be adding a lot of calories to your day, which I think is something interesting about all of these new foods where they're introducing protein in.
Well, I also think back to your point though, like if you normally have one of these drinks a day and then you're switching it out for the protein one, like maybe that's really what they're kind of like targeting at. But I always think these are the things that are the secret calorie catchers in your diet, right? Like, I just had a latte and a breakfast sandwich. That's not a lot of food, but if you have a latte and a breakfast sandwich from Starbucks, you're easily at 600-700 calories.
Yeah, so I guess if you're already drinking it, there's really no downside to adding this if you can tolerate whey protein. Interestingly, I did, you read the quote from their CEO. He also said that these drinks are having like a high return rate, as in people are returning to buy them again. So I suspect we'll continue to see different iterations of this at Starbucks, and every other coffee shop will follow suit because they'll want to get in on it as well.
Yeah, exactly. They will want a part of that billion-dollar market. What about some other weird food items that have recently added protein in? I think two of my recent favorites, Alex, are protein Pop-Tarts. If I'm having a Pop-Tart, I'm not sure I'm thinking about nutrition in the first place. Those things are like sugar bombs. But protein Pop-Tarts was one of my favorite. And then protein in other drinks, like protein in soda, or my absolute favorite of protein water.
Right. Like if you're buying protein water, why don't you just get some tap water and get some protein powder and mix the protein powder into the water? Because I can guarantee you the cost per unit on the water is more than you would pay if you just bought like bulk protein powder and water.
You'd be able to buy a massive vat of protein probably. Like, yeah.
What about cup of noodles protein ramen?
Yeah, that one's hilarious.
Kids love ramen.
Maybe we can get some more protein in them if we find the protein ramen.
Yeah, a lot of these things strike me as just like unhealthy things where they're adding protein to it, and like, is that supposed to make you think it's healthy, or is that just supposed to be like, well, it's a bonus, at least you'll get some protein?
I think it's probably the latter, honestly, right? Like that at least you get some protein in while eating this thing that you want to have. But some of them also taste gross. Like I bought some protein chips one time and they were disgusting. So I was like, yes, I might be getting protein, but I was trying to have chips and these taste gross.
Is that the one that was like chicken that I tried? It was like a chicken protein chip, because there was one that I bought, and I can't remember if you're talking about the same thing, and it was almost like a chicken. It had like chicken skin on it, and you could see like little.
That sounds great.
I'm not kidding. Like there was almost little pieces of like chicken fur on the chip. Like
no.
Yeah, it was disgusting. Few more of these things that are out there. Papa John's has incorporated protein into their pizza crust. And then my favorite, Khloe Kardashian's cloud popcorn with protein which is also available at Starbucks.
Wow, you can double protein then. Add protein latte and some protein popcorn.
Yeah, so a lot of these things are still processed, still packed with sugar or other unhealthy chemicals. And it just leads me to wonder, could people just like eat chicken instead? Just like a chicken breast? Wouldn't that be easier?
Back to as I said, back to what the bodybuilders did. Chicken breast in a tub and a drink of eggs.
Yeah, or a steak or something, like natural foods. Seems like a better way to do it as opposed to eating unhealthy snacks with protein, quote unquote, infused into it.
Well, especially if you're thinking about that you're doing this for your health. I think you need to look at your whole diet and not just be adding protein into stuff that perhaps you should just be avoiding or limiting, moderating.
Yeah, I think it's these massive food companies looking at declining profits from these items that have been so popular, especially in the United States, unhealthy food items, and they're panicking. That's what's driving this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's it for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And we'd love to hear any comments or any thoughts that you have on this protein craze or any other fitness topic you're interested in right now and you'd like us to cover on the podcast. Leave a comment on the podcast at our website, practically.fit, or shoot us an email at alex@practically.fit, and we'll share it on a future episode.
That's right. Yeah. And we're excited about the new website. Been getting things set up there. So we're a little late on getting out the email for the last podcast and probably this podcast. So by the time, if you're getting it through our email list, apologies for being late on that, but wanted to get everything situated with the new website before we were pushing out content. And please head on out to practically.fit. Like Abbie said, you can subscribe if you're listening and subscribing through, Spotify or Apple or another platform. You can go out to the website and get our content directly to your inbox. So speaking of our content, Abbie, what will we talk about on the next episode of the podcast?
We're going to be talking about trail running, which is one of our favorite activities and something that I have recently been talking about getting back out and doing more of. So we'll be covering that in more detail on the next episode. But until then, remember, when it comes to fitness, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be practical.
We'll catch you on the next one.